Welcome to Apothecary After Dark, the official podcast of Amityville Apothecary.
This is what real witches talk about when the doors are locked, the lights are low, and the incense is still smoldering.
From spell work and shadow work to hot takes on hexes, healing, and everything in between, we're serving up magic, mystery, and a little bit of mischief.
So pour a cup of your favorite libation, light that protection candle, and settle in. It's about to get witchy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Apothecary After Dark, the official podcast of Amityville Apothecary, where we talk about everything from astrology to witchcraft, but what we want to talk about when we kick all the customers out and we lock the doors. And I'm so excited to be joined by my business partner and best friend, Danielle DC.
Hi guys, so nice to meet you. I am Danielle, also known as Danny, and we have a very, very special guest with us tonight. This is our friend Steve Forrest, who is the author of a whole series of astrology books. He is legendary, and we're thrilled and delighted to have him here with us on this talk. And we're just going to scratch the surface, but it'll give you an opportunity to get to know the man behind these books.
Absolutely. Welcome, Steven. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be here. Back to Long Island.
Excellent. So really interesting, but I was introduced to your work in 2020. It was given to us by Carolyn Elliott, who wrote a book called Existential Kink and did a program during COVID. And The Inner Sky was in our library of reading materials, and we'd have to go through and she'd give us assignments. And I just find your approach to astrology as it not being so fatalistic, like I'm a Capricorn, so I must be this way, or I'm a Libra, I have to be flaky and indecisive, but giving yourself tools and sort of an outlook. And I think that that is where astrology goes astray for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your approach to astrology and explain, what do you call it, evolutionary astrology?
I call it evolutionary astrology for the simple reason that we are evolving. And that's not really a philosophical statement. That's an observation. We use reincarnation and it gets very metaphysical, but just cutting right to the heart of the matter, when people ask me about this, I love to ask them a question. And I say, remember how dumb you were 10 years ago? And everybody laughs and nods their head. And then I add, isn't that good news? Because think how far you've come. We are changing, we're growing, we're evolving. And the trouble with conventional astrology, it locks you in a personality description. I learned that we would delineate a personality, like draw little lines like a prisoner on your personality. And all sorts of philosophical problems with that. But the big problem is it's just not true, and we prove it every day.
So if you were to describe to somebody who's never explored astrology or knows about it, how would you explain the relevance or the importance of it and as it relates to their life?
Sure. The world, probably your bookstore, is full of books telling people how to live. It's like, here's my version of how to live. And it will probably work helpfully for a lot of people and not helpfully for others. Like, for example, here's a question that presses on all of us. Should I be in a relationship or not? Am I the marrying type or not? There's different kinds of people, and if you're not the marrying type and you're trying to be married, welcome to misery and emptiness, and vice versa. There's no generic answer. You look at the chart, and you can often get pretty good insights. Is this a relationship-oriented person? Is that what your journey is about? Trust and love and interdependency? Or are you more like a single star? like our sun. Half the or two-thirds of the stars in the galaxy, or sun-like stars, are double stars. And half of them, or the other third, I should say, single stars like the sun. That's astrology. About two-thirds of us should try to be in relationships. About a third of us shouldn't. We get that right by looking at the chart, and that's why we should do it. There's nothing generic about how to live. It's individual.
I love that. Danielle and I have the same birthday, including the year. So,
Yeah.
and we're both born around New York City. You were born in...
I was born in Huntington.
You were born in Huntington. I was born in Bayside, Queens. So
It's almost
there,
the same.
right there.
Well, what about birth times? Are your times at all close?
Yeah, I'm very close. Yeah, I'm 12:47,
And I'm 2:22 p.m.
and I'm PM as well. So less than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Less than 2 hours, but I mean, obviously, we would have a lot in common astrologically. That just jumps right out. But about half the symbolism is called houses, and that's like where the planets are in relationship to the horizon. I remember two twins that came to me, and everybody was saying, we love your readings, but these two guys, they're twins. They're so different. They're like night and day. Their birth times were separated by about 15 minutes. One of them was born before dawn, the other one after dawn. They were literally as different as night and day. And so minutes really, really count. Houses count. It's like kind of where your life is happening.
I agree. I think part of what makes our partnership so beautiful is we have so many similarities, but then our strengths balance each other out, because she's a Capricorn rising and I'm a Sagittarius rising. But we're both Libra suns and Leo moons.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah, a lot in common for sure. You would find a lot of common timing probably in your lives, like, beginnings and endings of significant relationships. I have a funny story there. There's, the famous kind of golden age movie star Humphrey Bogart and of course Lauren Bacall. They got married and they have a baby named Steven, born on January 6, 1949. I'm Steven, born on January 6, 1949. And
Oh, that's funny.
so I've never met Steven Bogart, but you can read about him in Wikipedia. And I learned that like his relationship history, his marriages and endings of marriages is an exact parallel to mine.
That's so interesting. We have a lot of that.
We have almost exactly that. Exactly that. I think we got married the same year the first time. I think we both have two kids. We both have a girl and a boy. We
both got divorced.
We both got divorced. I think I separated first. Yeah, it's really interesting.
We both got laid off at the same time.
Yeah.
And then we said, well, let's be part of the solution. So we opened the shop.
Yeah,
Exactly. Here's one that'll give you goosebumps. This is a fun story to tell. It's allegedly true. One of the kings of Italy, Victor Emmanuel, he eats in a restaurant, and the guy who owns the restaurant looks like him. They get talking. They have the same birthday. And so they're both interested, but they're kind of busy, one being the king, one running the restaurant. They arranged to get together to compare notes. And the king gets word just before that this restaurateur had been wounded in a hunting accident and was in the hospital. He'd been hit by a bullet. And so the king rushes to the hospital to see the guy. And on the way to the hospital, the king is assassinated.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I got that in a book by John Anthony West called The Case for Astrology. That's the documentation on that.
Oh,
That
boy.
is wild.
Well, thankfully, we never had any of those types of synchronicities.
I'm going to knock on wood. Yeah. No, I just knocked on our wooden counter just to be safe.
As cool as this stuff is, it's fun to talk about. It's amazing. It kind of proves astrology. There's lots of good stuff about it. But it bothers me because it reinforces the very problem we're talking about at the beginning, the idea that it's all in the stars and what happens to you is controlled by the planets. And that's just not true.
So what would you say to people, that are so rigid, and we get these types of customers in that they're maybe new to finding astrology and they're so hell-bent on the archetype of what they think their sign is, and they take that on as like painting either, coloring their entire life or excuses for bad behavior or not changing or staying stuck. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I hope they're enjoying imprisoning themselves. That's what I would think. It's probably not what I would say to them. Um, when I was a kid, because I started doing this astrology when I was really young, still a teenager, I learned all the Scorpios are sexy but treacherous. That kind of stuff. It just epitomizes the problem. And looking at life, I realized I met a lot of Scorpios who were sexy but treacherous. It was accurate. But then I met Scorpios who were just honest, the kind of good friend who would tell you what you didn't want to hear, just real intense, close, connected people. I cherish them. And then, so like two kinds of Scorpio. But then the light bulb lit over my head. As I got a little bit older, I saw how some of my friends who were sexy but treacherous Scorpios were becoming less treacherous, not less sexy, less treacherous, and more honest over time. That a bad Scorpio could turn into a good Scorpio. And that was sort of a very primitive insight. And it eventually blossomed into the idea that signs are the symbols of astrology are not like these generic programs that get stuck in your head. They're paths, they're evolutionary pathways. And in your freedom, you can go down those pathways as far as you choose to, or you can sit there in front of a television set and be a sexy but treacherous Scorpio until the day you die, And so freedom is part of it. Human freedom and personal responsibility, they're part of it.
I love how you broke out in the book, The Inner Sky. You break it down so beautifully, especially as you describe the different zodiac personalities, if you will. Because I was reading through Taurus, and my father was a Taurus, and so many of those traits I identify in him. But he's not just that one thing. You give so many different descriptors as to how a fully evolved Taurus, like ways to grow and to stretch, or Aries, which is so quick out of the gates, that little fireball, the baby of the zodiac. So, maybe act before you think. But what are things that Aries can do? What's their challenge in life to evolve and grow? So I love how you did that. Thank you for that.
Well, thanks for saying that. I would quickly add that, we all have a sun sign, and that's the kind of astrology everybody knows, or at least has some familiarity with. But where's your moon? You may be in Aries with a Pisces moon, for example. And so, Pisces is more mystical and spiritual. And then if you're an Aries, the warrior, with a Pisces moon, spiritual warrior becomes the archetype. But if you're an Aries, let's say with a Leo moon, there's something more of the soul of a performer there. And so your warrior work, your courage work is like stepping out on the stage one way or another. And that's spiritual in the broad sense, but it's not, like trekking in Nepal on a vision quest or something like you might get with a Pisces. So you really have to take in the moon, the ascendant, all the planets. This leads to one of my favorite lines. Each birth chart, each human being is as completely unique as a snowflake and as similar as snowflakes are. We're all built out of the same stuff, but slightly different variants and areas of emphasis.
I love that.
So I'm assuming over the course of your career, you've analyzed thousands of birth charts, and felt like thousands upon thousands. I couldn't even imagine. Yes. And, we've only been a shop for 6.5 years. And I think what you quickly learn is that, as like you said, as similar to snowflakes as we are, as that we're all individual and unique, is that also a lot of our problems and issues and hangups as human beings are sort of super similar.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's similar, but there's a spectrum of them, and so again, the beauty of astrology is the way it holds the mirror before your individuality. It honors you and your unique path, and what's going to work for you, and what you can safely not pay attention to in this lifetime.
Yeah, we have 10 different planets and then the different elements and modes and all the different zodiac signs. So I I was taught similar to the snowflake, it's the blueprint of your soul. So that's why two twins that are just, born minutes apart can be so different. What houses are those planets residing in? Are there conjunctions? Is there a stellium? Like, there's so much to it. Once you start understanding the chart, it unlocks so many insights about your strengths and personality traits. And it's just fascinating.
Sort of two responses to what you just said. They're both positive. The idea that two people can be born very close together in time, but technically their charts are rather different, because of house differences, like we are talking about earlier. But you can also find a situation where two people are like born at exactly the same time, have exactly the same chart. That's not a totally rare situation, or close enough to exactly the same that it counts. And they're still different from each other because the soul inhabits a chart and makes choices within the chart, within that whole spectrum of possibilities that each chart represents. And so, some astrologers are a little embarrassed. They want to sweep it under the carpet that people with the same chart are different from each other. It's like that invalidates astrology. Not the kind of astrology I do. The chart is a tool, and the soul uses it according to its wisdom or its folly or whatever its unresolved issues are.
Right. Or both, wisdom and folly. We have, I think, both.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. So,
yes. I would hope.
for sure. And also just the spectrum of interests. There's so many different ways that will come alive in real life. So I think that's great. And then once you understand the basics of the inner sky, you have predictive astrology, which is following the patterns and movement of the planets and like what's to come. So what do you have to say to people that might be brand new to this about predictive astrology?
I would say that it is your fate, not my favorite word, but it is your fate to face certain questions and certain possibilities in a certain order in your life. And we can determine all that astrologically. But how you answer those questions and which of those possibilities you actualize is up to you. And my task as an astrologer is not to predict how you'll answer those questions, but within the limits of my wisdom to suggest the best answers and try to aim you at the top of the mountain as best I can. But it's predictive astrology. The term, I'm not really comfortable with it because it often assumes we're going to tell you what's going to happen to you. And I just don't believe in that kind of astrology because I do believe in human freedom.
Being one of the paramount experts in astrology, I gotta know. Yeah, I'm sure you have insight. Talk a little bit about, because we don't have that much time, but like the amount of leaders, world leaders, and very successful business people, whatever their field may be, that consult with the astrology.
I have no idea. It's so much from my expertise.
I wanted some tea.
Yeah, Ronald Reagan, of course, famously was outed, like what's that, 40 years ago or something, astrology in the White House, and it was kind of a scandal in some circles. But let me, I've got to be very careful of confidentiality.
Of course.
Let me say I've done astrological work for, I would say conservatively, 3 or 4 dozen people whose names would drop your jaws and oh my God, that's generically easily recognizable famous people in various fields. And of them, there are two who've been out, in sort of public with their endorsement of my work. I've generally gotten good reviews from everybody, but two who've been visible. That's Sting and Robert Downey Jr. But other than that, I'm so tempted to name names, but it's dirty pool. I'm
We
not
gotta be
going to do that.
careful.
But
No,
I
we
think
won't.
the reason I say this, it gives us some indication of the fact that even though astrology is much more widely accepted now than it used to be, people in positions of public visibility often seem to want to keep their interest in astrology quiet.
So, Stephen, we've recently had so many of the outer planets change signs, and the astrologers on social media are like, "Oh my gosh, the sky is falling, the sky is falling." What's your take on how to be a human being during this time?
Be flexible, because the energies are definitely changing. So Pluto into Aquarius, of course, Neptune into Aries, and very, very soon, within the next few days, we get Uranus crossing over into Gemini. The last time they changed very close together like that was, I think, about the middle of the 18th century. And then I believe again in the middle of the 15th century, if I'm remembering right. So it's not unprecedented, but it's unusual. They move pretty slowly, so getting them to coordinate like that doesn't happen too often. Um, it's it's a it's a hard question for me to answer because each of those is like a huge subject unto
Yeah.
itself. Pluto and Aquarius, oh my God, et cetera. Same with the others. But we're in a different environment now. Let me give you one piece of it. I'll go sort of as deeply as limited time allows into just one piece, and that's Neptune in Aries. And so the mood of the collective is very much affected by the sign that Neptune is in. It's a moody planet. It's kind of the spirit of the times. We could say similar things about Pluto, but Neptune particularly. Now, Aries, the sign of the warrior. The evolutionary intention of Aries is the development of courage. That's what it's all about. So we're talking spiritual courage. I mentioned the spiritual warrior early, Neptune and Aries. And so the next step is to realize that if you want to become braver, what you need is fear. Nobody gets any braver unless they're facing scary stuff. And so the universe is generous. The laws of synchronicity. Neptune has just gone into Aries. Are things a little scary now? Is there terror all over the planet? And of course, as human beings, we react with horror. We react with compassion. The suffering, the wars, Gaza, Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. What's happening in America now, the division and the hatred and the fear. But it's an evolutionary necessity. If we're going to get braver, we need scary stuff. The universe is saying, okay, time for all of you to be spiritual warriors. Stand up for your souls, stand up for what you believe. Put your derriere on the line if necessary, to stand up for what you believe. That all sounds, I guess, pretty good, but let me add one more layer to sort of prove it to you. 2011, 2012, Neptune went into Pisces. It takes 165 years to get around, so it's slow. So it's been in Pisces until it's crossed into Aries. And it's very pure energy. Neptune rules Pisces, mystical, spiritual. Now here's one of the ultimate spiritual questions. What is reality? After all, what is this thing that we're looking at? Is this a dream from which we will awaken? Is this Maya? Is this the great illusion? You've all heard that language before, and it's good language. It's the most fundamental spiritual question. What is reality? So watch this. What happens with Neptune in Pisces? Fake news. artificial intelligence, the putting words in the mouths of politicians that they never said, deep fakes and all of that. And the effect on society is catastrophic, of course, but it is also part of just God's plan, a plan of spirit, that suddenly everybody is faced with this question of, I'm looking at it, but I'm not sure it's real. And so there's a higher spiritual purpose in it, just like there's currently a higher spiritual purpose in some of the scary stuff that we're facing. There'll be some people who wouldn't like what I just said, but here's my final defense. I don't write this stuff. I just read it.
Right.
Wow.
That
you
is
just
true.
gave me a lot to think about.
But for me, it's oddly comforting. I don't know if you feel that way. It is, because I think sometimes in the face of the fear that you're saying that we need for Aries to develop courage, it's like, okay, I could choose how I'm going to respond to this. And now that you sort of gave us broader context, it gives us all permission to choose how we respond instead of feeling put upon. Even if we're not on the front lines of, a horrible situation and we're reacting to it, we still get to choose how we react to it and then what we're going to do next. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Allow me to recommend a career as an evolutionary astrologer. You've got the instinct.
Thank you.
I love it. I'm going to choose faith over fear and have faith. Yeah, have faith that it's going to work out. But I'm glad that we're not, in our own little silos and that we're all going through it. So that is comforting.
Together.
For sure.
That is true. Well, Steven, thank you so much for joining us. Where can our people find more information about you, your website? You said you're teaching at Omega. So where can they learn more about your work? And of course, we have signed copies of your 2 books available in our bookshop, The Athenaeum at Amityville Apothecary.
Yes.
Thanks for doing that. And thanks for asking about, further information. Pretty simply, I have my personal website, books for sale, lots of free stuff there. Forrest, 2 R's in Forrest, Forrest Astrology, one word, .com, forrestastrology.com, personal website. I have a school. And there's various ways of participating in it, from kind of low impact to, lifestyle. And that's forrestastrology again, .center. And then I have a cell phone app, astrological cell phone app, that will help you understand your charts of friends and so on from this evolutionary perspective. It's called Leela. You can go to Leelaverse, like universe, but Lila verse.app, and learn about it there. On my website, you have to dig a little bit, but last month I did a newsletter on my website that involves a way of getting Leela, the premium Leela, for free for 4 months. It's worth a dig. So that's back to forrestastrology.com. Scroll down and start searching, and you'll find that article. So those are 3 ways.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed this. It's been fun.
I appreciate you. Like I said, you have an open invitation to come to see us in New York.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. So stay in touch.
Yeah, I will. Okay. Bye-bye.
Those of you listening, please like, share, comment, and let us know, what more questions you have, and give Steven a follow, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all for tonight, witches, but the magic doesn't stop here.
Be sure to follow Apothecary After Dark wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Leave us a comment or review. We'd love to hear what's stirring in your cauldron.
And you can always find us at shopamityvilleapothecary.com or at Amityville Apothecary across all the socials.
Until next time, keep your wards up, your wands at the ready, and your spell work sharp.